Wait, now we have the random inclusion of Edward into the old team. I don't know. There was a side of me that this entire episode 9 of Shadow House second season, that I was sort of thinking, wait, are they trying to imply that Edward is Christopher? I don't think that's the case. And the only thing that can make that make logical sense is if when they actually fuse with their shadow, the living doll with the shadow, that they change appearance somewhat and they change their name. I don't think that's the case. My mind immediately went to the idea of, well, we haven't technically heard Christopher's shadow or living doll's name, so it could be Edward, but typically they take the living doll's name upon themselves when they're first formed. So yeah, I don't think they're saying that Christopher is Edward, but there's still a side of me that's entire episode going, wait, they keep showing these shots of Edward watching Barbara and Mary Rose. They're never really kind of showing Christopher in the shot. So that's the weird thing. So the only thing I can think of is that you have this period of time where Christopher, builds this group of star bearers. Edward was one of these star bearers. They work together, and then at some point Christopher leaves, and maybe possibly Edward graduated the same time, or at least was invited to the grandfather's wing the same time Christopher was, because it does seem like in these brief shots of the history with Edward's perspective, Barbara still looks happy, or at least Barbie looks happy, and Barbara's next to her. So at least it implies that when they graduated, that's when things went downhill. He's obviously noting specifically that Mary Rose, something happened to her. So really cool, interesting viewpoint of everything from Edward's position. I've always kind of thought that, here's my old thinking process that I'm kind of pulling back into the present time. I always thought that there's a possibility that eventually Edward would become a good guy. I don't know why. There's something about Edward. They're almost as if they're putting him in a position that, yes, he's selfish. Yes, he's taking down people for the sake of getting to the third floor. He is selfish, no doubt. But something sort of was giving me a hint that there's a possibility that eventually they might actually try to redeem him somehow and make him somehow, not that he's going to turn on grandfather, that he will at some point do good. I guess, do something good. I don't know, there's something about him. He's sort of, I guess it's because, in a sense, because he's so selfish, there's a side of me that believes that he's sort of somebody that could push against the norms. It seems like he breaks the rules a little bit. And all it really takes to technically be a rebel, or how they put it, a rebellious element. The only thing it takes to be a rebellious element is to push against the rules. And Edward technically does that, so I'll be interested to see what they actually do with Edward. I didn't like him in the first season, but at the same time, he was interesting. He was one of the more interesting characters in this place that seemed to be all about molding to the norms. Everybody around Edward is technically doing the same thing as him. Everybody wants to get to the third floor. Everybody wants to do what they all want to basically suck up to grandfather. And so everybody's sort of looking for a reason to stab another person in the back in order to get to the third floor. And so it's a competition. And so Edward was our viewpoint into the adult wing to see somebody who is in that competition. So he is interesting. But no, this episode was really all about, yes, technically Mary Rose essentially becoming, I don't know at this point, becoming an adversary to Kate. That Kate is in her way and she does not want Kate to get in her way. Now, they do kind of play a little bit in the earlier segments as pretty much her explaining her situation, us finding that Rosemary is technically okay because she let her be okay. That whole thing was terrible. But essentially, the moment that everything twists and she goes, oh, I've been tricking you this whole time. I'm coming after you, Kate. I need to tie you down. I don't need you in my way. My last chance is tomorrow. I will get another invitation tomorrow. This is my last chance. I can't push this off any further. And it a little bit of insinuation at some point in the chase that Kate believes that Mary Rose, during the reveal that Mary Rose essentially was trying to manipulate Kate to release soot so that she can use it. Because Mary Rose's other ability is that she's able to control all the soot of other people and thus essentially use that power for herself. It's almost like she's absorbing somebody's power to use it against them. But for a brief moment, it was sort of trying to lay out these brief flashbacks to almost insinuate that Mary Rose not only was trying to stop Kate so that she can do her next plan in order to do something to get out, but that she was training Kate. She was constantly instructing her. And now, granted, that could be her other self coming out. she's technically an instructor. In the Children's Ring, she was instructing them at everything. And now she was still giving Kate lessons. You shouldn't trust people and all this kind of stuff. It almost felt as if Mary Rose was planning for the idea that she could fail. And if she fails and she does leave the Children's Ring, if she gets taken out or snuffed out, or if she has to be forced to go into this coffin in order to merge, she wants to leave Kate her legacy, basically. Kate, you will be the one that will take on what I'm leaving behind, essentially. So it did feel like, even though it was her trying to stop Kate from ratting her out, it was also partially her essentially saying, I need to teach this girl something. Like, I need to leave behind this element, this rebellious element. But no, this was technically the big reveal, at least to the characters, about the merging aspects. Again, for a while now, we've sort of gotten the hint already that this was the case. It was kind of what they revealed through Edward. Edward seemed like he was a living doll, and at some point he becomes overcome by Shadow. You can kind of assume that the living doll had the ability to control Soot, but it was really them revealing to us that these are one. But at least we get a full perspective of what that entails. The ending of this episode was terrible. Essentially, this whole process, this ritual they do, this box of completion, where when they get an invitation, they have to go into this box. And the box is with both the Shadow and the living doll, and at some point, a cocoon forms. And then after, I think they said 2 weeks, eventually they come back, they open it up, and they cut away the cocoon. And if everything goes well, they're one. The living doll ceases to exist, and the Shadow envelops the body. They essentially possess the human, and the human themselves is kicked out. Now, what they show in the landing of it, I didn't recognize who it was, so I'm guessing it's just a random extra. The only one I can think of is maybe Susie, but I don't think it was Susie. Just some random extra, apparently failed. That didn't look too good. The failing is basically death. It looked as if the Shadow itself just rooted into the human body. The living doll just became this dirt that the Shadow basically rooted through and killed it. So, no bueno. It seems like that's part of the responsibilities of the warden of the Children's Wing, is to essentially evaluate each of the children and decide which one will actually succeed at this box of completion and become an adult. And it seems like he, going into the situation at the very end, claiming there's 2 there and 1 is likely to fail. But that's okay, because if 1 fails, the other one's okay. Now, a part of me is sort of wondering, because they kept talking about 2, and 1 could fail. And it seems like they were placing it in a way that they were assuming that Mary Rose would fail. So that makes me believe that 2 invitations was sent. 1 went to Mary Rose, 1 went to this person that deceased at the end of it. And their mindset was that Mary Rose is probably going to fail, but it's okay, because as long as one of them works, we're okay. Well, that 1 just failed. If this is the case that Mary Rose was 1 and this was the other one, that leads me to believe that they now trying to think, this Mary Rose is probably going to fail. It makes me wonder if Edward is shocked by this and is going to go, crap, now if Mary Rose fails, I'm out. Or if deep in Edward's mind, because it does seem like he's in that mindset when he's walking and talking to them, Mary Rose isn't going to fail. Mary Rose will succeed, because he knows Mary Rose. Mary Rose was excellent. She was great. She had great potential. But in his mind, he's going, but why is this stuff? Why is she failing so much now? Why is her soot power so low right now? It doesn't make any sense. She's always excelled at everything. Something happened since I left. And as we know from our perspective, she's been holding back because she didn't want to be invited. She wanted to create a rebellion. Now, the weird thing is, I'm curious. It seems like they're drawing a lot of conclusions. Edward is drawing so many conclusions. He's literally laying out everything we just learned from Mary Rose's words. It seems like he's drawing pretty much the entire conclusions. Like, he's super smart enough that he knows that she's running a rebellion, that she's doing all this stuff, she's holding back her powers, and if I don't get her out of there, she's going to cause a rebellion. And also Kate, she's getting Kate involved right now, probably, and she's going to have Kate under her wing. And it's like, okay, we just spent like 9 episodes figuring this out, and he's literally just figured it out in a couple... It would have to have been 2 weeks. He would have had to figure this out in 2 weeks. Because again, if this one lady is a failure of one of the 2 that he sent invitations for, he's had 2 weeks based on her grades coming down and her not showing up and causing the soot sickness. He's figured everything out. And it took us 9 episodes of watching it firsthand to figure it out. So, I don't know, maybe they're just trying to push things forward quickly, but that's quite a stretch, Edward. Either way, I am very impressed by this episode, just based on the idea that I thought Mary Rose was going to be simply, it's Kate, but she's doing things terribly. It really does seem like the moment that she realized what was going on and the invitation and everything, she's known it for a while. Obviously because she is one of these special type shadows, that she knows the memories from previously. But it seems like she also at some point learned the truth about how they form. I don't know if she figured that out based on before she became a shadow. Again, my mindset was the idea that possibly Kate was one that was a shadow once before, a shadow family member, an adult that went back into another body. Maybe that's the case for Mary Rose. How she knows about the forming of the two together, maybe it says it in the invitation. I doubt that. But either way, I did like the aspect that it was like, okay, well, then why'd you do all this stuff to Rosemary? Rosemary steps forward and says, no, it was my idea. We don't want to do this. Which is pretty cool because in contrast to what I thought in the last episode, I thought she didn't care about the living dolls. Again, she did say that this is an entire mansion full of kidnappers, but based on her actions that put people in harm, which they acknowledge in this episode, I felt like she didn't have as much respect for living dolls as Kate does. But no, this is true. This is actually the case with her as well. She does not want to harm Rosemary. They're doing everything to prevent the fact that she will have to extinguish Rosemary if she takes that invitation, which makes me believe that when it all comes down to it, unless somehow Edward can force Mary Rose, to go into this box, she's either going to have to be extinguished in the end, similar to what happened to Shirley, or they're going to have to figure out a way of escaping. And she's already said that she's figured out this exit goes to a cliff. This exit goes to Grandfather Wing. One or the other. And as we kind of point out in this episode, we don't know the extent of the powers of the adults. We were possibly gonna see it in this episode because we had this whole encounter with this the previous warden. So you had like everybody's consuming themselves with their shadow, and then it's like, let's not get into that right here. Let's not anger Grandfather. Let's not get in this fight right now. I'll be curious what happens to Emilico and Sean, because we did have some point in the OP where it shows that Emilico is kind of overtaken by something, and I'm curious if that is her powers taking over Emilico. So we're gonna have this whole sequence where essentially she's gonna use her as sort of a way of stopping Kate, having Emilico fight for her. Yeah, super interested to see what happens next episode. Like I said, technically, it seems like Mary Rose has some sort of plan next episode. Now, Kate could stop her before it gets to the next day, but if she could stop Kate, then that means we're going to possibly get some sort of big disaster happening next episode. I'll be curious to see what that does. So, anyways, my thoughts on episode 9 of Shadow House second season. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below. Comment. Let me know what's thought of the episode. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already. I do news, reviews, first impressions. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, we have a Patreon link, a tips link, and a super thanks button down below. I greatly appreciate everybody that considers, and y'all take care.